I understood a lot of the stuff and the reason why, some of the decisions were made at Marblehead. So let's get it out of the way. Let's chat about it real quick.
Let's just get the elephant out of the room.
So if you're not familiar with it, let's get the elephant out of the room so we can stop dancing around it. So the steps at Marblehead, and I'll pull up a video of it here. So these are the steps at Drummond Island. We showed these in a previous episode of the show. And actually, I'm about to follow the line over here to the left. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only seen one picture of after the fact. And I believe that I am driving through the area that is now essentially just kind of been graded.
That's correct. It's now Subaru approved, if you ask me. I'm Kristy Beyer with the Drummond Island Tourism Association, and you're listening to the Trailhead Podcast.
Rev it up, let it roar, feel the ground shake. Pedal down, dust flying, no time to waste. The trailhead's calling, engine power on a roll. This is where trails start and stories unfold. On the starlit skies, where the wild things roam. Every trail a journey, every Jeep a home. Meet at the trailhead, where the wild ones run. The dust kicks high and the day's not done. The road wide open and the dirt in our soul. This is where trails start and our stories unfold.
Welcome back to the Trailhead, everybody. Today we're rolling into Drummond Island, a prime spot for off-roaders in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, UP, if you're familiar. With its sprawling trails, stunning lake views, and rugged terrain, it's a destination that calls to anyone looking for a true off-road experience, especially if you're in the Midwest. Our guest today is Kristy Beyer, Marketing Recreational Trail Coordinator with the Drummond Island Tourism Association. And I'll check with you to make sure I got that right in just a second. Kristy is here to share what makes Drummond special, give us an insider's view on its trails. And yes, we'll talk a little bit about the steps and what's been happening there recently with all of that. So we're excited to dig into it. Welcome to the show, Kristy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. We're going to talk about one of the topics I love the most, which is Drummond Island.
Well, I would hope so. If that's what you're doing as just to say, hey, come to my island.
Right.
Pretty
Come
cool.
on over. We'd love to see you.
So I had wanted to have you guys on for a while. Obviously, the catalyst for this discussion was because the steps at Drummond Island kind of brought up a little bit of controversy a couple of months ago. And it had brought up in our conversation on the show that I had been there previously and then I had been on the steps. And I have video actually of the area that has been flattened out. And so we kind of talked about it a little bit and kind of discussed what the community was saying, but we didn't really have anybody that could talk to it. And so I kind of started reaching out to a bunch of different folks. And just to set a baseline for everybody listening, Kristy can answer some questions about the steps. And I'm not here to grill her or make her feel uncomfortable about actually coming on the show with me today. But it will I will throw some questions at her, see if she can help provide some insight to it. There's a lot of agencies involved in this, in that whole thing. And the Tourism Association is really kind of an ancillary piece to that, I think. And she might just be able to provide some insight onto why and some of the decisions that were made, at least that she's aware of. So we will talk about that. But I just kind of wanted to talk about, I've always kind of wanted to talk about Drummond Island in a grander sense. And I could spend an episode talking about it with my fellow co-hosts, but none of them have made the trek that I have made. In 2020, we were kind of locked in the house and we didn't have a whole lot to do. And I work for Trails Off-Road, and my quote unquote boss at the time called me up and said, hey, do you want to go to Michigan? He knows I'm from Illinois. And I'm like, sure, that'd be great. Let's do it. And so I came out to the island. I spent 5 days on the island total, and I mapped 14 trails that you guys have out there. I did not quite get them all. We had to come back and grab a couple later, but it was a really good time. I had a whole lot of fun. I only got hung up on one tank trap, and I managed to get myself out.
Oh, good for you.
But it was a long day for that one. Yeah. Oh, it was a long day. I violated one of my main rules, which is don't wheel by yourself in those situations.
Oh,
And yeah, my winch was underwater, and I managed to get out and had to take a swim in the frog-filled puddle water and
yeah.
get it all out of there within about 10 minutes. So it worked out, but whew,
Yeah. That one's tricky.
yeah. And we'll talk a little. Well, I'll ask. I got some questions about that later. And I know it's only certain times of the year that happens, but man, I managed to catch the really perfect time to do it. So, yeah, I had to throw away those boots.
You sure they're not
they
still in there?
they weren't coming back. Oh no, they came home with me. I thought I could salvage them, so I left all of their stinky loveliness in the vehicle, along with the stinky dog, because we've been traveling for a week and a half. There was a lot of smells, and I have a 2-door Jeep. Yeah, but it was a great trip overall. Like we just really had a blast. It was limited interaction with people because it was COVID, but the folks that we did run into were fantastic. And I mean, even one of the locals, I had a conversation with the guy at the hotel there, and I cannot remember the main name, the main hotel, the main resort that is there, but we stayed there one night. And when I brought those boots back, and I was looking for a hose. I'm like, I got to try to get some of this dirt out of here. And as I was trying, I asked him if he could borrow his hose. And as he kind of stood there, we were just kind of talking about it and the influx of vehicles. And he was less than pleased with some of that. But I kind of explained to him that, people are out there, and it's just, they're going to go where people are, where the trails are at. You got to figure out ways to mitigate it. And, I don't necessarily know if we agreed on anything, but it was a great conversation. So,
Oh, good.
yeah, you guys have a fun little spot out there. How long have you been in?
I've lived on Drummond Island on and off. Well, right now I'm living off and working remotely. But I lived on Drummond Island for 6 years
Okay.
and visited extensively. It started out as once a year we'd go up, and then all of a sudden, let's try it in the fall. And then so we were going summer and fall, and then let's do it in the spring. And before you knew it, it was just like we're going up every month, and it was just kind of ridiculous. So then finally we moved up there. But yeah, I fell in love with it. It's just, and it's a lot of people either love it or hate it. It's just, there's nothing to do there. And a lot of people will say, well, what is there to do on Drummond Island? And I'm like, nothing. They're like, that's what you go there to do. You just don't want to, if you want to just sit back and chill and be part of the world, that's the place to go. So
Slow down a little bit.
no, it's, and it starts with the ferry ride. As soon as you get to Detour Village, which is the opposite side of the St. Mary's River, and you cross over on the Drummond Island ferry, it's only a mile across, but it's just like your whole body just kind of exhales and just like, I'm on vacation now. And then even as a person who works on and off the island, I still get to that ferry, and it's just like you have to wait for the ferry, and now you're on island time. And it just makes you pause and, just chill for a second. And then you see the water. Sometimes you get to see a big freighter go by, which is always awesome. That happened to me a couple of days ago. I was driving back from up north, and the ferry, literally, it looks like it's going to run into it, but it, the ferries or the freighters crossing right in front of you, and the ferry goes right behind it, and you're just watching that big old, they call them Lakers in the Great Lakes. They're not ships. And you just watch that go by. It's just amazing. So it never gets old. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen it, and it's just amazing.
Are you a Midwesterner by trade or by travel?
So I grew up in Howell,
Both.
which is down by Pontiac, Detroit area, and moved up to Petoskey, which is
Okay.
northern lower peninsula. If I do the hand thing, I started out here, then I moved up here. I'm trying to do this backwards. Here, is that right? And then now, the upper peninsula over here. So, but yeah, I've lived in Michigan my whole life. It is a beautiful state, and I've traveled outside of the state, and there's beautiful places, across the country. But Michigan's it's just so beautiful, and the Upper Peninsula has got my heart. It just has. I mean, it's down to earth. It's full of nature. There's always nature everywhere. I used to talk to people about my drive to work. I said the most interaction I have is maybe a deer or a fox, cross the road on my way to work, and I don't see any cars. And now I live down by Lansing, which is in the heart of Michigan, near the state capitol, and there's cars everywhere. And I said, it's just too people-y for me. I've grown out of being around so many people. It's just so nice to be immersed with nature. So,
yeah, I'm a big fan of the phrase "too people-y" and off-roading. I think it's a good way to put it. So if you've been in Michigan your whole life now, for those people who are not familiar, and a lot of our listeners are in the West Coast, so they're not going to be. We have a decent amount on the East Coast actually, but a lot of our listeners are on the West Coast, and they're not necessarily familiar with how little off-roading there is in the Midwest, especially on sanctioned either BLM or forest land or DNR land, and in Michigan, I spent a lot of time when I was growing up in Traverse City, which is just on the other side of just on the other side of the lake. It's just on the other side of the bridge. And there's a lot of DNR roads there. And I was much younger. I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to be driving my old Jeep around on it. Got myself stuck a couple times like I wasn't supposed to. I didn't find out till much later that those weren't legal trails necessarily for me. And it wasn't until recently that the DNR started to open up a lot of what are considered forest roads there to off-roaders and OHVs. And so it's been kind of an interesting couple of years in your guys' state, especially considering that you guys were used to be the main and only destination for off-roading. I would argue you're probably still the only destination for interesting off-roading in Michigan, but there are more places to go off-roading. No.
The Western UP has a couple of nice places to go throughout the Hiawatha National Forest, but Drummond Island totally is. Matter of fact, we're still the largest closed loop trail system in Michigan, and we also have on top of all of our ORV and ATV trails, we have Turtle Ridge Off-Road Park, which is over 400 acres of just all kinds of different terrain to explore. And how that's not a Jeep badge of honor on its own, I don't know, because it totally could be.
So that was one of the things I was kind of surprised about when I showed up on the island, and I kind of knew about it. I'd seen the stuff in some of the advertisements for it, but my goal was to be going out to map trails, so I didn't do a whole lot of reading up on it until I was kind of in a hotel room and kind of looking at stuff. And that's when I found, I'm like, so wait, on top of, what is it, 40 something miles of trails, or is it more than that?
We have about 40 miles of ORV trails, 70 miles of ATV trails, so over 100 miles of trail systems for ATVs and ORVs on an island.
Okay, so on this little island.
It's the second largest island in the U.S. Great Lakes, the third largest in the Great Lakes. Manitoulin Island in Canada is the largest. And then Isle Royale, which is north of the Upper Peninsula, is the second largest. And then we're actually the third largest in the Great Lakes, but second in the U.S. Great Lakes. 87,000 square miles, 150 miles of shoreline around. So it's a pretty big island. And 2/3 of that is state-owned land to explore.
And that's pretty awesome. And that's it's just not something you see out there as much as you do out west. And that's the only reason I said little. We just have and I came from the Midwest. I was not prepared for the vastness of these areas. But it's a kind of unique thing.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. We just got back from Moab. We went the last part of September. And it was the first time actually that I've been off-roading outside of Michigan, believe it or not. And quite the experience. It was, we went to Green Valley and parts of Moab, Poison Spider and Steel Bender and those kind of things, and did all those, but very different. Wow,
so you weren't messing around either.
Oh, no. We don't. Well, I don't drive. That's the thing. I have Ozzy drive me around in his Jeep, so I'm just the photographer for the group.
Okay, all right. That's fair.
Will ride with just about anybody. Well, just about anybody. Some people are a little squirrely for me to drive with because I still get scared a little bit. But I usually get out and take the photographs so everybody has a picture of what just happened. We we did, gosh, what was the name? The Intimidator. I don't know if you know where that's at in Moab. But those guys are so brave. The one guy, he stood on the edge of the rock and literally his heels were off of the cliff practically. And he goes, if you hit me, then we're both going down. That's how much space they had to get around the rock. And I said, I am not driving in the vehicle with you guys. I'm getting out and taking the photo. I feel better on my own two legs than in the vehicle. So I don't know. I'm just not that crazy.
See, I get told I'm crazy all the time, and I don't feel like I am. Like I'm a 35-inch tire guy, kind of middle of the road. I don't normally do stupid stuff. I did have a couple weird things go on at Trail Hero, but most part I try not to do stupid, silly stuff. But I could totally get that. So you don't have a rig of your own, though?
I do not. I have a Subaru Crosstrek that takes me wherever I want to go. So that little guy, he does great in the snow, and it's mostly because I've lived with Subarus almost my whole life. I come from a family that rally car. My kids are into rally car racing, so my oldest son is
cool.
Pit crew chief for a team. He was out of Ohio, so yeah, that's why I have a Subaru still. And everybody's like, well, you should get a Jeep. You really need a Jeep. I'm like, why do I need to drive? I have a perfectly good driver. So we'll just put both our money into one vehicle instead of putting it into two. Doesn't that make much more sense?
I mean, well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask a Jeep person, that makes zero sense. The Jeep person will tell you, well, you have to get both vehicles in-house at the same time so that you can swap parts between them as needed. But it's all justification. That's all we're doing.
Nice.
So, and that's all right. Hey, I don't knock people. I don't knock Subaru drivers. And if that's what you're driving and it gets you where you're going, then drive it. And if you're not interested in, necessarily risking life and limb out on a trail, then you don't have to do it. Let somebody else do it. Strap into their vehicle.
Oh yeah. I can always find somebody to ride with. I've got some friends from Ohio and Indiana, and if they're in the area, they'll jump in. They don't care. They love that I take pictures and I share them with them, and that's just my gig. I love looking at nature and pointing out the features of Drummond Island for people as they're driving along and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's my position, is in the passenger seat.
Well, if I manage to get my way back there, you're welcome to ride with me.
Awesome.
Perfect.
I would be happy to.
I'd be more than happy. I'm usually by myself and I get no pictures. Awesome.
See, that's what I mean.
It's been really funny for me is, we moved from Illinois to Colorado about 10 years ago. And I started doing trails out here then. And in the last year and a half or so, all of these connections, well, if I include Drummond, that makes it 4 years ago, all of these connections to the Midwest and, businesses that make off-road parts and stuff like that, they're finding their way into the things that I'm talking about, that I'm doing on a regular basis. And it's nice. It's nice to see. It was, growing up, I had a Jeep, for 15 years in Illinois. I couldn't do anything with it because there's just no place to go legally. It's nice to see it kind of exploding out there to some degree, which I'm sure presents its own challenges for you.
It does. We had an off-road club that wasn't super active, and just this past year we've really are revitalizing the club and getting more people involved and that kind of stuff. And then when Marblehead happened, of course, then we were on everybody's radar, so good or bad. So right now we're just kind of taking that opportunity to invest our time and efforts into making it a great club again. So we think we just got kind of complacent and somebody's taking care of the trails, but they belong to the people of the state of Michigan. And so we want to be good stewards of them and have the voices of the people that use them on board, so that things like what happened at Marblehead don't really happen again.
Yeah, and I get it, and I think that's a lesson that a lot of people learn, and unfortunately, often, especially when there's been an influx of new folks into the off-roading sport, and while that influx is retracted a little bit, it is still up year over year since COVID, and I think with that came a lot more folks who just didn't have the etiquette knowledge. Frankly, you start increasing numbers of people and the percentage of bad actors goes up just by statistics. And I understood a lot of the stuff and the reason why, some of the decisions were made at Marblehead. So let's get it out of the way. Let's chat about it real quick.
Let's just get the elephant out of the room.
So if you're not familiar with it, let's get the elephant out of the room so we can stop dancing around it. So the steps at Marblehead, and I'll pull up a video of it here. So these are the steps at Drummond Island. We showed these in a previous episode of the show. And actually, I'm about to follow the line over here to the left. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only seen one picture of after the fact. And I believe that I am driving through the area that is now essentially just kind of been graded.
That's correct. It's now Subaru approved, if you ask me.
Okay.
But yeah, that's it. That's the
It's
exact
Subaru
spot.
approved.
So it's super approved. Nice footage, by the way.
Thank you very much. When all of this came out, I'm like, man, I bet you, like, I'm looking at the picture afterwards. I'm like, I think that's where my drone footage is. I think it's where my drone footage is. So the steps at Drummond Island are a part of, and the South Marblehead Loop, I believe that's the correct name of the trail. It might just be South Marblehead. That is the Jeep Badge of Honor Trail. The entirety of that steps area is the part that goes down towards the Marblehead Overlook. And the Marblehead Overlook, and Coloradans, I do not want you to laugh at this moment. I just want you to acknowledge the fact that this is a high place in the state of Michigan. But it's a couple hundred feet off the ground?
Yeah, I wish. No, it's it's about 85 feet of a limestone cliff. That's 85 feet. That's why I said when we went to Moab, I'm like, holy crap, this is a whole different one. It's like Marblehead on steroids. So, but it overlooks Lake Huron, and you can see Canada. Coburn Island is out in the distance. So, I mean, it's a beautiful view from up there. It's not like you're looking over the desert or anything like that, or other rock features.
It's gorgeous.
It's just beautiful because there's a tree line at the base of this, and then the shale beach below. So that's a small strip. So you're literally standing just above the water practically. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah. It was a special spot to pull up on. I mean, we were there during the week too, so there was nobody else there. It was really quite nice. But it's a pretty spot. And yeah, it's not going to be the top of, Argentine Pass or Saxon Mountain here in Colorado, folks, but it's pretty unto itself and for entirely different reasons. Mm-hmm. So let me ask this, the basic question I kind of already know the answer to, and just as far as what you know from it. So what was the decision made, or what was the decision made that led to those actions being taken to kind of make it two-wheel drive suitable? So
the original grant was a special DNR grant that the DNR has a special pot of money to apply to bigger projects that aren't on the scope of trail maintenance and those kind of projects. And that's what this was. This was a separate one. It wasn't something that the club ran. We knew about this project that was supposed to happen at Marblehead. The project, though, was just to put 1 ton or larger boulders across the path to keep people from driving right down to the very edge of Marblehead, which you've never really been supposed to do, but people do it all the time. It was starting to get the reputation of the little top of the world, which now I just laugh at because it's not even close to the top of the world. Right?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Yeah,
it's not even close. But that was kind of what the reputation was getting, and it was just because people are driving right to the very edge, which it can be very dangerous. And so we wanted people to be back further, and the grant was to put boulders to block that access. That's as far as the Drummond Island Off-Road Club knew what was going to happen there. The rest of it happened between the DNR and the contractor that's there, and how that ended up getting smoothed down. We were told it was to get large vehicles down the steps in order to place those boulders. And so, that's what we were told.
Gotcha.
And as far as who exactly made the decision, the DNR has been taking responsibility for it. The contractor, I think, may have had different reasons for doing that. But I don't know facts on that. So
Okay.
it was really just between the DNR
Can't
and the
ascribe stuff to
contractor.
people without knowing
And
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, and when it happened, someone had sent me a picture and said, "Did you see what happened at Marblehead?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. They're just supposed to put boulders there." And so I was just as shocked as
Yeah.
everybody else and upset. But what did come of it is now you have a spot where those ATVs and smaller vehicles can get down a little bit closer to the steps so they don't have to walk. So, some of the people that have those ATVs are little side by sides, or, grandma and grandpa who are just out for a ride, and they can't really walk that far anyways. And that's why they're driving around in one of these little buggies. So it helps them to be able to appreciate the natural feature and that kind of stuff. One of the things that came out of this, though, is that the DNR said, okay, yeah, we didn't realize that we were literally ripping the face off, or, the wall out of the Taj Mahal here. So instead, there was one half of that section of Marblehead that had it does have a species called walrus that grows along the side of it, and we weren't supposed to be using that side. And I don't know how many times I tell people not to go down that side of the steps, but they continually do it and continually do it. And so what happened is now the DNR has opened up that section, so we really didn't lose any distance as far as how wide the steps are. It's just they've kind of
Okay.
shifted over a little bit, and you just have a path. Now, the sad
Okay.
thing is that the rubble and stuff that they tore down out of that section, they kind of piled up right next to it. And of course, now we've got, side by sides and Can-Ams and stuff doing King of the Mountain on the pile of rocks and driving around it on the back side. And so it's just kind of created a whole nother kind of mess out there, which is unfortunate. And now we have,
Yeah.
people that are like, oh, well, we'll show you. And they just crawl right over the top of the rocks that were placed there to keep people from the edge. And there's been pictures of people that are out on the very edge of it and stuff like that again. So I don't think that they realize that eventually that feature may get shut down, or even bigger barricades that aren't as natural as a boulder, might have to be put in place, like guardrail material and it's just such a beautiful natural space that you don't want to ruin it by putting in, steel bars and barricades to keep, lack of better words, dumb people from doing dumb things. They just can't seem to respect the signage and that
No.
kind of stuff. And so they're ruining it for everybody, and I just wish they would stop, but it happens everywhere. I mean, we saw places when we were
Yeah,
in Moab of people doing stuff,
it
and I'm like,
does.
you guys are idiots. Why are you doing that? You're ruining it for everybody. I mean, it's not exclusive of just Drummond.
It's a constant problem here for us, and it is, especially here, in Colorado where I live, 5 minutes from a trailhead. That means a lot of other people can live that close to the trailhead, and it makes for a lot of problems when it comes to people widening trails, or people leaving trash out on trails, or people just behaving badly on the trails. And like I said before, you get a statistically larger number of people out there, and the behaviors tends to get a little bit worse. I don't ascribe to all ATV people are bad or all UTV people are bad, but I think that there's been an explosion in that market, and it hasn't been responsibly maintained or hasn't been responsibly governed. Customers haven't been educated when they're buying these, 800 500 horsepower devices that don't weigh anything and can just tear through stuff. And it's we have a lot of work to do as an OHV community to kind of help bring those problems in a little bit here. So I did not know, and I was unaware of the fact that other side of that, essentially there's a tree in the middle of that, what used to be the two left and right climbs. And what you're saying now is that the stuff if you're coming off of the beach to the right of that, which is the harder section, and I think most people would agree that's the harder section. That's why I went to the left. That is still intact and wasn't legal at the time I was there then, when I was there in 2020.
Yep, that's right. That
but
wasn't
I'm sure you
legal.
guys have the same problems trying to keep it closed.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. And there used to be boulders at the very top of that. But what would happen is someone would get a winch cable out and they just winch it out of the way and I'm just going to go down there anyways. And we get that a lot. I don't know if you remember when you were there, area on the way out to Marblehead called Sitgreaves Bay or Pilot Harbor. It's along the beach front, and there's usually big boulders that kind of keep people on the trail, but so they don't go out onto the beach. And we have people all the time wenching the boulders out of that spot as well. I almost every time we drive out just to check the trails this summer, we've had to try and push or wench the boulders back into place to keep people from going to areas they're not supposed to. And the issue is that we have people say it's state land. They say it's state land. It belongs to us. Why can't we go down there? And it's like, but you're not responsible enough to treat it with the respect that that area deserves so that it will be around for a lot longer. Drummond Island is unique in the fact that it has a lot of endangered plants and species that are, a high priority or a threat of extinction. And we can't just have people just willy-nilly, making these huge trails, widening them just because they don't want to get their tires wet, driving up through the woods and making a whole nother trail. And we're having a lot of areas on the island that have that happening right now. And it's just incredibly unfortunate that, a species could be endangered just by us driving on them. It's just not necessary.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of folks out here in the West would, and rightfully so, they can be like, I don't understand why I live in a state that has all of this empty space where there's tons of habitat for these species to grow. And I think there's a bit of an argument to be made that, there's a lot more of that here. But when you get out east, and in the Midwest and in these areas, Michigan's in a colder climate. Colorado, we're cold here. We had 2.5 feet of snow over the weekend, but it's all gone. But if that same 2.5 feet of snow fell right now for you guys, you're stuck with it for the rest of the year. So it's a different growth cycle, right? It's like when we tell people here, when you're above 10,000 feet and you're, above the timberline where the growth season is 2.5 to 3 months a year, you got to be real careful about where your tires are at. Like that's where you really need to be careful on top of everything else and not doing the braided trails and all the rest of it. So it is, I get it. It's way more important, and especially in an area where you guys have limited, what I would consider limited, opportunities to go off-roading, whether it be the park or the 100+ miles that you guys have of trails there, or any of the other trails in the forest there in Michigan or even Wisconsin. So it's just something that I can't stress enough to people, especially when you're out there. Like, you just got to be real careful about where you are in the trail.
Right. And another feature on Drummond Island that people should be aware of is the Elvar that we have. I don't know if you traveled up to Fossil Ledges while you were on Drummond Island, but it's on the north end of the island. And you have to go through it's called an Elvar, which is where the glaciers scrubbed off the limestone, made it all smooth, left, they're called boulder erratics, where they're just kind of big boulders dropped everywhere on this flat surface. And then nothing would grow there except for dust collected and things. And so all the vegetation that you see out there is growing within like an inch of soil. And there's a lot of sensitive species out there too. But at one time, before people got involved, people would go up there, and this was in the 1980s. People would go up there and rip ditties and stuff because it's just like an abandoned airstrip in some of the spaces. You could see the rock is just smooth. It looks like a road that's not been taken care of. And people would just, like I said, they'd be ripping through there and tearing it up. And like I said, that soil is so thin that it just kills anything that's underneath of it. Well, the Nature Conservancy went up there and protected almost 4,000 acres between the state and the Nature Conservancy of this land, and you're not allowed to drive on it anymore. And we don't even want people to walk on it because the soil, like I said, just the weight of your body can crush the root structures during specific times of the year and things. And now you would not even know. There's so much greenery there, and trees and little shrubs and prairie type grasses and something called prairie smoke that everybody comes up and looks at. Um, these natural plants and things are all growing there. Um, it's like a miracle. A, a gal that I used to work with was instrumental in helping that develop. And I took her up there when I lived on the island, and she's like, this isn't even the same spot where you didn't take me to where we were before. Where's the flat grass or flat rock and everything? And I'm like, it's here. It's just under vegetation now. And so when people can get involved and do the right thing for the land, we can protect it so that it can be enjoyed and it becomes habitat again for wildlife. And I think that's another area of the island that it's very special to my heart, because it's just a really great story of how people's involvement and sticking to it and respecting the earth can make it a better place. So, and there is a 2-track that goes through there. It's called Colton Road, and it goes up to a place called Fossil Ledges, which is a saltwater feature, and everything is underwater. You can't see the big 50-foot cliff. You can sit on the little steps in the water sometimes, and there's thousands of saltwater coral fossils in that limestone, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's just like there's treasures everywhere, and of course, we don't want you to shake them. We want you to leave them alone, but it is something to see if you can get up there.
100%.
Yeah, it's worth it. If you don't have a vehicle big enough, you can call Jay Stressman, and he can take you out there. He does tours out there, and then we have a ATV person that rents ATVs, and you can go out that way too. So, even if you just want to come to the island and you don't have your rig to bring, there's ones you could borrow. So.
Has Colton Bay Road gotten bad? Because the last time I was there, it was pretty smooth most of the way through.
It's smooth most of the way out. So just before the turn into Fossil Ledges, there's a beaver dam, and I don't know if you remember that, but it gets pretty deep. We have 35. It was rubbing the bottom of our Jeep with water and stuff. The beaver has been very industrious.
Okay.
And some seasons are worse than others. Spring,
been very
obviously.
busy since I was there last, I see. Okay.
Yeah, he's been very busy. And so he's flooded out that road in a couple spots. And he's getting to the point now where I noticed he's actually taking tree logs that he's dropped and putting them alongside of the road and then patting them down with mud like he's building a road. It's insane. And every time I go out there, it's just like, what the heck is this guy doing? But we'll have the DNR go up and probably trap
he's
the
built
beaver.
himself a sound wall.
He totally is. I don't know what he's doing, but it's hilarious.
That's what I would have done. Colton Bay, that whole area was really cool. And I didn't realize at the moment that we were there at the Fossil Ledges, because then I would have put my drone up. Because if you go online, you can see a lot of the fossil. You can see it because people have taken other drone shots and video up there. It's really apparent, especially on a nice clear day.
On a clear day, it's amazing. It's become a really hot spot too for that dispersed camping. There's a couple spots there that they're starting to camp there. They'll hang hammocks in the trees and, on the way at the other end. So they're not really bothering anybody that comes up to look at the Fossil Ledges, but it must be just so peaceful up there at night when nobody's there. The northern lights, I mean, that's the right side of the island for it and everything. It's a dispersed haven.
Northern Michigan at night near the lake is going to be gorgeous. So I have another question. Then we can get off the steps because I'm good with talking about that. Like I feel like you kind of confirmed some of the stuff that I had kind of heard and talked about with other people about it. And like I said before, you're not the person to answer all these questions. I figured I had somebody from Drummond Island that might be able to give me a better idea of what the actual situation was, as opposed to what can happen in the Facebook and the Instagrams of the world where things get twisted.
Yeah,
so,
I think
thank you very much for that.
No problem. The DNR, just the person that is there is relatively new and didn't really realize the significance either. And I think that kind of added to it. So we've been working with them, and he's learned a lot about ORV stuff. And so
I'm sure he has, and I'm sure he's heard a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've answered a lot of questions. But he's doing the best he can, and we just want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And so the more people that get involved and share their love of the island and the respect for it, I think that moving forward, it will be better. And we didn't really lose a lot of ground. As I said, we gained the other side, which we weren't supposed to be on. So,
Right.
We didn't lose much. Yeah.
I think that might be the messaging piece that needs to be drilled into people. Like, you have all been driving on an illegal part of the trail for X number of years, and they have now made that part of the trail now. So it is all official, because the steps at Drummond Island were supposed to be half of what they are today. Yeah. So I think that's a decent case to make. Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Good.
So don't get me wrong, I always hate to see anything like that happen to any kind of an obstacle, especially anything that's permanent like that. You can't undo those things, so you just got to learn from them. And then it also reminds those of us who are, stewards of trails, of any kind of trail, whether it's a trail in Michigan or a trail in the East Coast or out here in Colorado or Utah. If it's a trail you love, make sure you're plugged into what's going on, and make sure that you're friends with the DNR people and the BLM people, and talk with them, because they'll give you a heads up, like, hey, I got a question for you on this, and I know you're out here all the time. They will come to you. They will come to you, because they know we're the people on the ground more often than not.
Exactly.
I have another question for you along the route of trail maintenance.
Okay.
And this is just because I need to see here if I can pull up my absolute failure from one day. Again, for those of you unfamiliar with Drummond Island, there is an area on the southern side of the island, and it has a number of what they call tank traps. Maybe you can help me answer this question, because Google likes to guess at it. Why are they called tank traps?
All the trails on the island seem to have one or two different names. That one, they're tank traps because your tank's going to get stuck on something on the bottom. So that's why I think they're called tank traps. There's a north arm and a south arm too of tank traps. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. The south arm is what I consider you need to be experienced. Definitely don't go in there without someone else. It sounds like you might have gone in and played around by yourself and found out. It's clay bottoms, it's tight spaces, it's deep,
That's
deep,
the perfect
deep
way to put
mud.
it.
Yeah, you don't want to go in there by yourself. And so we're trying to get signage there so that those that don't realize how bad it can get don't accidentally go in there and start getting stuck in things. The north arm of the tank trap is actually, there was some forestry that went on, and they had to smooth the road to get the trucks in and out of there, and the logging trucks. And so there's a smooth trail that goes, it winds through these deep, deep pits. I mean, the tank traps on the north side, I bet they're all 8 feet deep sometimes. And when the rain comes, and the spring especially, those are full of water. You could drive in and your vehicle will be completely under. And once you start going in, that clay just kind of sucks you in. There's no backing out. And you can realize it just a little too late. And as soon as you start to back up, it just goes, no, I think we're going to go this way. And it just drags you deeper in. So make sure you have a winch if you're going to try and go in those. But the south arm is more dangerous.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the braiding is going on too, right?
On the north arm especially,
where there's like multiple paths going down the same.
Yeah, the south arm too, now that you're saying that.
Okay, then that's probably the part that I was on.
Yeah, that's got a lot of braiding in it too.
That's just kind of how I felt. Like at the time, it was kind of hard. Yeah, it was so hard to determine what exactly was the trail there. But I essentially came to a decision point where I could either go left or right. And, often the bypass for anything is going to be on the right-hand side. And I chose wrong. And the next thing you know, my two-door Jeep was, pretty much at this angle in the water.
That's
and I had to quickly get, my winch, because it was, yeah. And it honestly, when I pulled myself through, it was big enough to swallow the Jeep. Like the only reason I didn't swamp was because I pulled myself right out. But for a whole moment there, I was, up to the halfway up the doors, if not almost to the window with water. So this is JD's warning for you not to go out into the tank trap area without somebody else. Just don't do it.
And because of it being clay bottoms, the water doesn't come out of it fast. And so you get a lot of slime and frogs and just, it stinks like rotting vegetation. And it's just terrible. It's not my favorite spot. And it is for some people, but it's just not. Oh God.
I it it was not fun. It was cold. It was froggy. It was definitely stinky. And at that point, we were on day 7 of this trip, and my dog he gets very free-to-wee in small spaces, and we have a 2-door Jeep, so
Oh no.
it had been a long week already, and it didn't get any. And you learn your lessons. The thing that I should have learned from that was that when you come across something like that, is you're supposed to just get out, find a stick, and then try to find out where your bottom is at, so you know what you're getting yourself into. The better solution would not have been out there by myself, but that's a debatable thing. I had satellite messenger and backup, and people knew where I was, etc. I still could have lost my winch that day.
Could have.
And I did not.
I'm surprised you didn't lose your boots. A lot of people lose their boots in there, where they get out and that clay sucks their boot and they're like, well, I'm not diving back in there to get that thing. Forget it. So you'll see boots in there every once in a while.
Yeah. No, didn't lose the boot. I lost them when I got home. They were irrecoverable. I could not get the smell out. So those $100 boots had to go bye-bye.
Oh
no. And that was my cost for my stupidity. And it's okay. Now, you pay your lessons. You take your licks where you're supposed to take your licks, where the universe says so, right?
Yep, exactly.
So to that end, I know the Drummond Island Tourism Association, you guys don't do anything directly with relationship to trail maintenance, right? Like you guys don't do any kind of like scoping for that, or, hey, we think this area over here really needs that kind of stuff. Or do you guys have like hands in it?
So interesting question. Because the off-road club kind of was going by the wayside, the tourism office ended up picking up the off-road club, and so they ran both of them at the same time, the tourism office and the off-road club. It didn't have a separate board. It didn't have any members or anything like that. And so the tourism office, knowing that ORV and ATV crowd feeds the island with tourism, they didn't want it to fall apart and have nobody doing it. And so my job right now is to help determine what areas of the island. It helps because I'm an off-roader, so I can, and I know a lot of the off-road community, so I can determine what areas need the most fixing. And I didn't realize how bad it is. There's a lot of spots that need, I don't want to say fixing, maybe that's not the right word, but some maintenance to curtail this braiding and the widening of trails and kind of keep people back on the trails and that kind of stuff. So we're helping with that. We're trying to get them separate, and there's some resistance to that. But I think in the end, it will be a standalone club, either with them or there might be a group that decides, okay, we've had enough trying to work with you. We're going to do this on our own and make their own off-road club. So right now we're kind of in a limbo spot. And so the tourism office is very much in controlling where the off-road club goes. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think the main question for that was because, to what your point was that you were kind of surprised by some of the areas that really need help. And I didn't really understand it until I kind of came home, and then there was more information that I was able to find after the fact than before the fact, and kind of seeing some of what should be and what shouldn't be there. Yeah. And real quick, this is for all of our listeners. I don't care if you're on the West Coast or on the East Coast. Trail maintenance is not tyranny. Trail maintenance is not the government taking away your trail. The trail maintenance is maintenance to keep that trail open. And sometimes that's going to mean coming through and grading things because it's gotten way too rough, and they need to come through and they grade parts of the trail, or they repair parts of the trail, or like you got a situation out there where the trail sounds like it needs to be better defined because that swamping of the island that kind of happens has caused people to go where they're not supposed to go. And it has to happen, guys. It's one of those things that has to happen in order for us to keep using these trails in the future. And for those of you who would like to complain that it's going to destroy all the obstacles, I guarantee you that in a couple of years, those obstacles will be back. They won't be as probably dug out or as bad as they were.
Right. Well, and on Drummond Island, and I don't know if you guys have this issue, but a lot of the trail system that's out there is forest roads. And so they have to be treated differently. On Drummond Island, there was an agreement that they have to be maintained so that a two-wheel drive truck can access them. We also want to make sure that on forest roads that emergency vehicles are able to get out there. We have a lot of hunters in the area that use those roads and stuff like that. So,
Right.
It got to the point where the ORV community thought that they were all ORV routes and they're shared forest roads. And so they're maintained a different way, and they haven't been maintained to that standard for a while. And so they did get really bad and challenging, and they shouldn't have got that bad in the first place. And so, we're trying to take a little more active role in making sure that stuff gets corrected. And of course, we're getting the pushback, like you said, that, people just expect them to be challenging areas. And forest roads aren't supposed to be challenging. That's where you have your scramble areas and that kind of stuff. And I always direct people, if you want challenging around every corner, go out to Turtle Ridge. That's got some spaces in it, the Citadel with the rock climb and the rock garden you can play in, and
it's purpose built for that kind of stuff.
Yep. And they just keep getting better. They just put in new ridges for you to climb up and down, and I just wonderful, that there's so much there that's underutilized, and you don't have to go on the trails if you don't want to. You could just go right in that park and spend the whole day. I mean, we've done it numerous times. The Jeep Jamboree USA spends a good portion of the day there when they have that big event on the island. So it's definitely worth it if people want to come out and check that out too.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is it's not just the trails on the island. You guys have some opportunities to get real hardcore in the park, in an area where it's legal to get hardcore. Like, I think there is one actual obstacle on the trail or on there that's not the steps, and I think that's Moo's Nemesis. And that's just a rocky climb that I don't necessarily know that they're ever going to be able to make anything less than a rocky climb. And I think it's just a trail. It might not actually be a forest service or a forest road.
That one's a trail. And then so is, and Tree Hugger is a trail that totally doesn't get used, and it has a nice little rock climb in it too. A lot of people just don't even know about that trail, and actually has two little climbs in it now that I'm thinking about it. One in the beginning and one towards the end of it.
Where is Tree Hugger?
See what I mean? Nobody knows about it. I don't want to tell everybody.
Okay, well, we don't have to tell me after we get off the air.
It's okay. If you go out of Pinn's parking lot, that trailhead number 1 there by the resort, instead of turning to go to Moo's Nemesis, you just keep going straight and follow that curve. It goes up to number 4. And that's another thing. If we could just talk about that for 1 second. So our trails are marked with intersections. So when I say from 1 to 4, I'm saying from intersection 1 to intersection 4. And it's not trail 4, it's not trail 1, it's an intersection. It confuses the crap out of everybody, but that's the way our trail system's built. And so we're trying to get better at marking our trails too. We did get a grant, a small grant to help us go out there, and we got permission to paint DIR, for Drummond Island Route, and DIT for Drummond Island Trail every so often on trees in a certain color, so that people know if they're on a trail or if they're on a route. And I think that that's important too, because we have a lot of these bigger side-by-sides that are larger than 50 inches on ATV trails where they're not supposed to be. And we ended up having to put boulders at the beginnings of these trails so that they can't access them, and they're ripping them up some fierce. So we have some beautiful, just gorgeous ATV trails.
I wrote all of these trails up for Trails Off-Road, and I used the trail names as opposed to the intersection markers. Although deciphering those intersection markers, let me tell you about how fun that data collection process was when I got home. I've taken up too much of your time already. Let's see. You've got the Jeep the Mac stuff that happens there every year. And does that happen on the island itself?
So it's a joint venture with St. Ignace, which is north of the Mackinac Bridge. They have a parade across the Mackinac Bridge on Friday. On Saturday, we have what's called the Ultimate Mud Bog and Tailgate Party, and we everybody just comes out and plays in the mud in this big mud pit that we have near downtown. Last year, we had the Michigan Mud Jam come, and
That's fun.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it was funny because there was one of the local guys who had this, I don't know if it was a Jeep Cherokee. He was driving it through the mud bog, and he was more entertaining than any of them there. I mean, I would watch him all day. He was so hysterical. He would go up the ramps, and at one point his tailgate came open and then slammed down, and the whole back glass just popped out. And it's just like, oh, jeez. He was highly entertaining.
Did it pop out in one piece or was it shattered?
Oh, it shattered and went into the back of his vehicle because he was on the downhill slope. So it slammed down, and just like you saw it just all break into a million little pieces. Oh, it was funny.
Those guys love doing that stuff. I don't get it, but they love doing that stuff.
And that's the place to do that.
Okay.
You don't want to be doing that out on the trails. You do that in a mud bog situation.
I got enough Drummond Island mud just doing the stuff I was doing.
Yeah. And the Jeep the Mac is open to anybody on the island. The mud bog, anybody can go to that. You don't have to have a Jeep, or you can have a side-by-side if you want to go through it. But you do have to register to go across the bridge, the Mackinac Bridge and back. And that's all done through St. Ignace Chamber of Commerce.
Nice. Do they let you drive an ATV over that?
They do have a special day that has a parade of ATVs that go across. They do a snowmobile one. They do a tractor one. So there's a lot of different vehicles that you can do as a parade across the Mackinac Bridge.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm a little, you can get me up on a 13,000 foot peak with a Jeep any day and I'm just fine. But you get me
bridge,
on a 2-mile long bridge and I've never done it. I lived in Chicago until I was 35 years old. I went to Michigan for the first 20 years of my life, and I've never been on that bridge.
It's so funny. It's 5 miles long.
Maybe someday.
And you can walk it. I walked it for 10 years straight on Labor Day. They used to let you walk all the way across, and then a bus would take you back. But now they only let you walk up to the center and then back down the same side. So
I probably won't, but we'll see. So I'd still rather hang off of a cliff on a Jeep. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
So this brings me up a quick question that I saw, I think, in the information that I had from you. I know I spend a whole lot of time washing stuff off of my Jeep. I clean my Jeep before I go on any kind of a trip like this, so I don't really bring stuff with me from place to place. But I felt it very necessary to clean out the clayey, gritty stuff that was in every component that I had after being stuck in that tank trap. And I think I saw something that you have a program where you're trying to educate folks on the importance of doing stuff like that to kind of keep invasive species from coming in or out of the island. Or
Yeah. So that was a new initiative that we did this year. It was called Roam Responsibly. We got a grant from the local conservation district to monitor all of the trails, which meant really that we just drove every single inch of our trail system looking for invasive species. And so things like spotted knapweed, Japanese knotweed, bunches of other ones. And as it was on the Plywood Camp Trail, they found a stand of cut leaf teasel, which is like a bristly looking pine coney long stalk of a plant. They found a stand of that, which is highly invasive. Once it takes root, it can take over a whole area. And we were able to call them, and they came. The conservation office came in and treated that so that it won't spread. And then that will be a high priority place for us to keep looking for the next few years to make sure that it was killed completely and that it's not continuing to grow. So the program we started, we hosted a training to let people know how to identify what invasive species. We picked about 10 or 12 of them, and we made a handbook that you can download from the Drummond Island Off-Road Club website. And we trained monitors. We went out and collected the data and put it into a database, and that goes into the Michigan Invasive Species Inventory. So now we know where all of these plants are on the trail system. And we found it was important to get the off-road community involved, because they're going into these areas, and if they see something that doesn't look right, a plant that's there that shouldn't be, they're going to be the first people to detect it. Conservation officers don't usually get on these trails and things in the heart of Drummond Island. And so if we can keep the island as pure as possible, that's kind of the goal. And getting the off-road community involved is going to be really helpful for us. Early detection is the key for any invasive species. I mean, we spend as a country billions of dollars to just really maintain so that they don't get even worse, a lot of the invasive species that are around. Yeah, it was a great program, and I was pretty proud of it this year. We did some posters. We did a coaster that we distributed to the bars to help people become aware that was invasive species are on their radar now.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So as off-roaders, we have been, especially in the last couple of years with closures in Moab and things like that, I think it's forced us as a community to kind of really look inward about how our impacts are either actual impacts or perceived impacts, right? And one of those things that I've known for a long time, just because I was a Boy Scout when I was a kid, was when you go hiking and you leave an area, you should be cleaning your boots. And if you're transitioning from one area to another area, you should be cleaning your boots, because you can track all kinds of stuff in with that. And for us as off-roaders, that's a whole different level, right? Like, you have a whole undercarriage of a vehicle that has all these nooks and crannies for dirt and seeds and stuff to get in. So all that crap that you just got in, Wisconsin or Minnesota on your way here now finds its way onto Drummond Island as soon as you roll off that ferry. Oh, yeah. And I think it's important that we start to be involved with doing that stuff. And then when we start reporting it, it shows that we're engaged and that we want to protect these areas just as much as everybody else does.
Yeah, we're not out there just ripping them up. We're actually, actively protecting them from invasives that could take over and change the entire landscape of. There's a couple fields along Glen Cove Road that they're just infested with wild parsnip. And how did wild parsnip even get on the island in the first place? It's not a plant that was native there. So it had to have gotten there somehow. And if we would have detected it early, we could have stopped it. But there's entire fields now of that particular plant. And what happens with a lot of these, like spotted knapweed, is a plant that you see everywhere, especially in Michigan. It's a little purple thistle-looking flower, I guess, but it's literally everywhere now. And what happens with that is the toxins from the root systems stunt the growth of plants around them. So if you have a field of milkweed, which is important for monarch reproduction and stuff, if it's surrounded by spotted knapweed, that's not going to grow to its full potential. It's not going to produce the right amount of seeds and that kind of stuff. It could possibly kill other plants that are around it and that kind of thing, and make that a monoculture of one, just spotted knapweed. And people just think, oh, it's just a purple little flower.
No, you're 100% right. There's, my father grew up in Kentucky, and every time I would go back to see him, there's a plant down there called kudzu. And if you're not familiar with kudzu, I will put a picture of it here at the bottom of the video. Kudzu it's everywhere. It drapes over everything. It kills tons of vegetation in the process. And it's hard to get rid of. They have entire teams of people all their job is to go down the highway and cut it back all the time.
Mm-hmm. I saw one study where they were using goats to eat it off the sides of highways, so that because they couldn't control it fast enough, so they'd send in these teams of goats to try and, that kudzu it just grows so quickly. It's so prolific. It just like you said, covers everything in its path. It's ridiculous. we never, if we ever see a kudzu plant up here, we just want to kill it right away.
I was going to say, like, I feel like that would just, at that point, all the flamethrowers come out. There's no screwing around with that one whatsoever.
No, not at all.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I got involved with invasive species when I worked at the tip of the Met Watershed Council. I know they were mostly water-based species, but I think that just kind of transferred into all invasive species and making people aware of them. It's just kind of become one of my personal passions. I'm just glad the effort that we're doing is going to protect Drummond.
Yeah, and I think that's the way these things kind of start to gain ground, as a couple people who are kind of passionate about those things start to drum, beat the drum a little bit and talk about it. And I think, and when I saw that on your intake stuff, I was just kind of like, we should talk about that, because that's something that we need to talk more about here in Colorado, especially for off-roaders. The hikers and the bikers, they're accustomed to doing that. They have special trail stations, boot washing stations at the beginning of the trail that they can use. And that's something that I think is in the future for us, and for good reason. I think it should be. And it's just like when you take a boat from one place to another, you have to make sure it doesn't have a certain kind of invasive species of mussels and those kinds of things. So yeah, I think it's important, and I'm glad somebody is doing something with it. So any plans to install a shower before you swim thing for people's Jeeps when they get on the island and off the ferry?
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that. When I was talking with the conservation district officer, he had mentioned, he's like, if we could just get a big power washing station that as you drive off or drive onto the ferry, it under washes your whole Jeep. And I'm like, oh, geez. It's just, I don't think it's going to ever make fruition, but I mean, it would be ideal. I don't think that it's just cost prohibitive. So
at the very least, if you put at least a handheld power washer at the side of the ferry, and you told Jeeps it was free undercarriage washes, they would do it themselves. At least some of them. So you might be able to get started that way.
Yeah. Well, we did have a boat washing station, and it did just that. It boat washes, where they pull up onto a rubberized mat, that they power wash, and it collects all of the invasives on that mat, so they don't just trickle back into the water. So, I mean, you could do that, but we have quite a few Jeeps come over at one time. Okay. So we'll see. Maybe you'll see it with a mobile power washing station.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, it was just when I saw that, I'm like, that would just be, I think that'd be a great idea. So, because I know, and don't get me wrong, to the gentleman who owns the gas station with the one gas station that has a car wash, I appreciate you and your car wash. Your scary, scary car wash with its one light in the middle of the night, and me trying to get all that gritty out of the front of my Jeep. But I also didn't want to leave the island with all that either. I wanted to get as much of that off of my Jeep before I went home, because I didn't want to take anything back with me to Colorado. So that's a great thing.
By the time you got back to Colorado, it would have been so solid. That clay, I swear, it's like cement. I've heard of people taking a sprinkler when they got home, one of those sprinkles that goes back and forth, and just putting it under their Jeep and just letting it go overnight, just to get it wet enough that they can power wash that off, because that clay is just like cement.
Actually chunk it out with a screwdriver or something. Mm-hmm.
Chisel it.
Yep. Oof, it's not fun.
No.
It was not fun to do. And again, and I've told this to listeners on this show before. That particular car wash does not take anything but quarters, so bring your quarters with you to the island.
Yeah, because it'll be hard to find quarters in the middle of the night.
It's only him. Yeah, he has quarters, but if he's not there, then you're not getting quarters. So that's just that's what you should know. What else? Anything else that we should talk about here before we kind of wrap things up and tell people to go visit some websites?
I cannot think of anything. We touched on a lot of stuff, so
okay.
I can't really think of anything else.
In that case, then, websites here are visitdrummontisland.com, and it is dioffroadclub.com for the Drummond Island Off-Road Club. There's tons of information on there about the island. They've got maps and information about lodging and all that kind of jazz on there. I used it a lot, actually, when I was coming out there. because there just wasn't a whole lot else. There wasn't a whole lot of information about the off-road trails out that way. So I was shooting blind a lot. To that end, there is information on trailsoffroad.com about most of the trails on the island, except for the one that we talked about earlier today, Tree Hugger, which we'll try to remedy now that we know about it. And you can also find Drummond Island Off-Road Club on Instagram at Drummond Island Off-Road Club, all together, no spaces, as well as Facebook. So yeah, that's visit drummondsisland.com. Well, Kristy, thank you very much for taking the time. I am 100% sure that I feel like you were probably sweating it a little bit because I reached out to you during the whole Drummond Island Steps fiasco, but I hope that I didn't, that this was all good and it didn't scare you or anything like that. Just had questions. We needed questions from people who are local and people who kind of had an idea. And it was a good excuse to have you come on here and just talk about Drummond Island as a whole.
Well, good. I was sweating it a little bit because we've been dealing with it for so long, but I think people understand a little bit more of what happened and realize that we actually gained something. Even though something was taken away, but we actually gained quite a bit. So, those that weren't able to really make it down those steps.
So that everybody can use it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's the big thing, I think, is when you start to explain to people a little bit better. I think they see the initial posts about it and they're just like, oh my God, it's destroyed and it's done. And, when you really start to dig into it, it's way more of a complex issue. And I think everybody involved with it, and I won't ask you to agree with this, but I think that everybody involved with it, or at least people that have kind of understood what has gone on so far, it's starting to sound a lot like there was just some people who weren't entirely understanding what kind of decisions that they were making, at least about what they were making decisions about. And there were just some other legal things that had to be considered, like the two-wheel drive rule and a few of those other things. And I think the communications piece is probably where it needed to happen. There needed to be some better stuff going on, but hopefully stuff like this kind of helps spread that word. And folks out here in the West, we're real familiar with the concept of, there's been this trail that has these two places that you can go down, and then you show up one year and you're like, well, that's closed off. And then you're like, well, that's probably because it was an illegal trail. Like, it's already in our brains that's how that goes, but it's not for everybody. And it's especially not for newer folks in the sport. So it's an education piece, and appreciate you trying to help get it out there. And I appreciate you coming on the show to talk about it and coming into the tiger's den, so to speak, and have a conversation.
No problem. My pleasure.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get out of here. I don't want to hold you up anymore. We've taken more than enough of your time. But you're welcome back anytime. If you guys got an event coming up, or if you want to come back and talk about Jeep the Mac next summer, I'm more than willing to have you back, and we could talk about some more specific events and get all away from that stuff.
Well, that sounds great. I'd be glad to.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kristy, for joining us today. And again, for you, those of you out there in Radio Land, so to speak, it is visit drummondsisland.com. And for the Off-Road Club, it is dioffroadclub.com. Again, Kristy, thank you very much. And thank you very much for listening. We'll see you guys next time at the Trailhead. Hello, Trailheads, and welcome to the Trailhead. Before the trails start today, we need to have a short safety meeting. Off-roading is an exhilarating but inherently risky sport. The insights and opinions that are shared by our hosts and any experts or guests on the podcast are intended to inform and inspire, not replace professional guidance. The Trailhead guests, partners, and any sponsors are not liable for any actions that you take based on what you hear. It is your responsibility to seek professional advice and make informed decisions, especially when attempting potentially dangerous activities. Always check current trail conditions and comply with local laws and regulations. Off-roading requires careful preparation and respect for safety, so ensure that you're well prepared before hitting the trails. And now that that's out of the way, buckle up and let the stories begin.
Let it roll through the ground shake. Pedal down, dust flying, no time to waste. The trailhead's calling, engines fire on a roll. This is where trails start and stories unfold. under starlit skies, where the wild things roam. Every trail a journey, every jeep a home. Meet me at the trailhead, where the wild ones run, where the dust kicks high, and the day's not done. With the road wide open, and the dirt in our soul. This is when trails start, and our stories unfold. Our stories unfold. Oh, when the trail gets tough, we crank it up. Dig down deep, yeah, we never stay stuck. Jeeps on the ridge, friends by our side. Off-road family, it's one hell of a ride. Wrecks keep rolling, the days wear thin. Gonna tell our stories round the trailhead again. Meet me at the trailhead, where the wild ones run, where the dust kicks high, and the day's not done. With the road wide open, and the dirt in our soul. This is where trails start, and our stories unfold. Our stories unfold. Meet me at the trailhead, where we roam, where trails start and stories unfold.